Welcome back to Resurrected Rose Petals. I'm your host with the most, Morris Valley. Today, the title of this lecture is Corporate Thuggin. Yeah, let's get it started. First and foremost, everything leading up to this lecture, if you check the videos before now, have built up to corporate thugging. Why? It's because I didn't want to come off as if I was speaking of immoral behavior or condoning immoral behavior or further corruption than it already is in this world. So I wanted to break down the aspects of organized religion and the corruption and tyranny that's going on in our country and where it derives from in its origin, as far as the twist of truth to tickle the ear so that people can be extorted and manipulated for capital gain or for monetary gain. So I wanted to break all of these things down leading up to this point. So when we got to corporate thugging, we were not the thugs. For I am only identifying who the thugs are in the inception of corporations that thug through paperwork. And the guns, instead of being on the street level, as far as with our African brothers and sisters here in America, of some which may call themselves African American, me, myself, I don't. For no other creed of people on this earth is claiming two nations at one time, but us. You got to be from one or from the other, or you'll be one tomorrow and another one today. Claim where you come from and be proud where you come from. Be proud of the place you come from and derive from in origin. But to get off into what I was bringing up, on the street level, you may have a thug that we know of today as being street warriors or soldiers, which may be pushing the agenda of Europeans in power, not all Europeans. For many of us have been made slaves and not even knowing what's going on, even Europeans. On the street level, we have thugs that may sell drugs and try to survive any way they can see fit to survive, with destroyed households which are a product of slavery. But on that aspect, on that street level, we use guns on those levels of street violence to propagate force, to take over territories, and to rise in power. Corporate thugs use the military and the police force to propagate taking over territory and rising to power. How is that possible? You may ask. Because when a corporate entity or a corporation, through its articles of incorporation paperwork, is put into motion and registered with the United States government through the Social Security Department, it forms its articles of incorporation and starts its business transactions and its business model and does business throughout the land. And when it does this and it makes contracts, which may manipulate or extort through paperwork and said territory, which may not have capital gain and may be vulnerable in its monetary aspect, meaning the ghetto. The ghetto, or the urban areas where my African brothers and sisters reside, which may call themselves African American, may not have the monetary force or will, the revenue to protect themselves. So their stores or their vacant buildings, might I say, that are turned into stores and revitalized and rebuilt and then inhabited by those outside of our area to have business with us inside of our area come into place. They have backing by government officials, being police department and military, to do its business as long as it's in the realm and the scope of being protected by law. So if that business comes into our territories, in our ghettos, in our urban areas, and propagates a monopoly to take over our areas and to buy up our land and put forth corrupt activities or behaviors. We can't put them out without dealing with the police and military first. Not only that, if a so-called thug in the ghetto or urban environment was to run up into a bank at point blank gun range to a teller and take the money, this would be a felony. This would be illegal or corrupt behavior. But on articles of incorporation paperwork, it can be a direct intent, intentionally, to go to a said bank to get a corporate business loan with never having the motive of paying back that loan, but keeping that money and being protected within law to rob that money or rob that bank of its money for its own gain. This is corporate thugging. See, entities of corporations were created to protect those who by bloodshed were erecting a civilization and government to be ran and of itself over everyone else, and to be protected in its activity. Meaning, there are gains in corporations that take place immediately when registering and forming a corporation, where you are protected as an individual. And in the Black's Law Dictionary, this is called your straw man. A corporation is defined in the Black's Law Dictionary as a straw man. It is a fictitious entity that is erected to do business as a vehicle with. What does this mean? This means that the erection or creation of a corporate entity is something used as a vehicle to do transactions of business through, but to be protected using that vehicle as an individual. So an individual that does business through this corporation is protected by that corporation from lawsuits and all forms of attack through monetary legal aspects by having the formation of this corporation. This straw man or fictitious entity is no different than the religious dogma that is put on us today, which is why I covered the religious dogma in such an intense and direct fashion. For one must ask very direct questions of how the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, were all narrated by Moses, which was not born until the 2nd book of those 5 books, and was taught by all of the wisdom of the Egyptians when he was hidden from the Egyptians, as the Bible says, and taken into the house of the Egyptians and taught in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. But yet, someone who was not existent in the beginning of creation is narrating a story about a creation that he was not around when it was created, because the knowledge derived from the Egyptians, but yet we know not ourselves as African men and women in America, and even in Africa as well, for it has been colonized by outside forces and countries within its country to extort its resources. So here we are, the new conception of Jesus as a fictitious entity of which it does business, and it regulates that business that it does through its court system and law, which you must take an oath to. When you enter a courtroom, the first thing they ask you to do is lift your hand and put your hand on the Bible and to swear to tell the truth. And this doctrine is Jesus. In Africa, Jesus was he ruled, which is covered in videos before this video today. But today we're talking about corporate thugging. And we're talking about how Jesus is used to do this thugging. Yeah, we're going in the rabbit hole today, y'all. Let's dive in. These corporations are merely tools used through religious and corporate aspects of being able to extort and manipulate its subjects. The whole theology of religion is usurped from the land of Africa. And when this was usurped or taken from the land of Africa, the reason its principles were changed into flesh so that our spiritual eye would be physical was so that we could be made cattle used for transaction. Slavery is a business, and corporations are merely slavery protection. For if any slave gets out of line from any extortion or corruption being performed on him, the law will protect those who are under contract before those who are merely in anger or outrage from being corruptly performed immoral business transactions on, before it protects the subjects that are being extorted and manipulated. Because contract makes the law. No matter what's on that contract, once that contract is put into motion by the government, it makes the law. And those binded by contract are protected by law that have put into writing that contract to be a transaction. Does not matter if you do not understand the English and the magnitude of how the contract is saying certain terms or regulations. That contract has been made law. So those being capitalized on have no voice because they are bound by contract. Many of us don't understand that we are bound through contract by believing in fictitious entities, such as Jesus the Christ, which is He ruled the lighthouse. How is that? It is because your soul is controlled by an outside source and an outside design and system, because you are believing in something outside of yourself. And because you are not empowered as individuals to know yourself, you are being manipulated and extorted by all type of fees and fines and regulations and capitalistic endeavors that you have no idea about, because of your belief in a system that is fictitious in its nature, because it is an replicated doctrine that derives from an internal principle of spiritual principalities that came from an origin before Jesus the Christ. This corporate thugging is intentional, corrupt, and forceful tyranny that has been carefully designed by the powers that be through the U.S. government and its constituents, that is, its allies. Why do you think there are so many holy books, from the Holy Quran to the Quran to the Bible, all speaking of Jesus the Christ, which has no origins of, even in its Hebrew origins, no J in the Hebrew alphabet, but all of these books are talking about the same prophet being Jesus, which never existed, which derives from He ruled the lighthouse, or the Christ He ruled, which was a principle of wisdom and divine power endowed on individuals that applied their lives to God. Why do all these books speak collectively on a fictitious figure? Because they are all corporate thugging. And when thugging gets deep and it gets forceful in nature, and it is time to put forth war, all the thugs arm their society and their citizens within their society to go forth with that war, as they sit at the table, just like your franchises that you never see the bosses at, with the employees and his management putting all the work in. Corporate thugging. That's what we're speaking about. Many of us have been called thugs that are merely victims of circumstances and environments. This thugging is weak compared to the thugs which sit at top, which rule by spiritual wickedness in high places, from priests and bishops to politicians to falsified prophets. This form of corporate thugging lies at the hierarchy of all thugging, and corporate entities and corporate structures are its forms of using paperwork to rob you mentally and physically. When you read your Bibles, you're reading about in the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, a spear was put into his side to cause him to bleed out. This is what you read in your biblical doctrine. In corporate doctrine, this is known as piercing the corporate veil. What does that mean? That means that once the corporate veil in the Black's Law dictionary definition, when this is performed, piercing the corporate veil, it is when the protection of the corporate entity or structure is compromised. And when the corporate structure is compromised, the individual using that corporation as a vehicle is then exposed to lawsuits and scrutiny of law to be monetized by those looking for justice from those performing transactions through that corporations. So basically, what I am saying is individuals become compromised that have corporations when they pierce the corporate veil and can be touched then by the law they are using to protect their corruption and tyranny that they are performing. How is that done, that the piercing of the corporate veil takes place? It is when you use the registered corporation as a vehicle to do personal business. Corporations are used for corporate transactions for business endeavors. They are not to be used for individual and personal purchases and operations. When personal purchases and operations take place, it brings down the veil of protection that protects the individual using the corporation for its transactions. The information I'm sharing to you, many say the game is to be sold and not told. But today I'm taking the value off because it is devaluing us as a people in this country. Slavery protection is the main reason that Europeans created the corporate entity in the first place. For those being extorted, manipulated, and monopolized upon were under bind contract by corporate law to not say or have the ability to have a voice because the understanding of what was being done to them was not known by them. For slaves were banned from all literary forms of books, libraries, and education for 4 centuries. The head start on those capitalizing on us in America, that is Africans in America as slaves, is 4 centuries ahead. So the formation of corporations, businesses, towns, cities, institutions of thoughts and learning are far ahead of our understanding, and we are in a circus figuring out who the lion tamers are, figuring out who the architects and the systems designers are, and those propagating the design to keep slaves under are. For now, there are hidden hands. How is there hidden hands? There are hidden hands because the operation is in full motion and swing, but those propagating it have many people facilitating its desires without getting up from a table. This is what corporations are about. For you are able to franchise corporations in multiple places, but being in one place yourself. Through management of members in specific orders of position with specific functions to perform for its capital gain as one structure. The hidden hand is then the ideal or idea of whom constructed the corporation to put forth its actions for monetary gain through all forms of its contractually binded members, to usurp further power and exploitation without being seen, because they are extensions of the development of that said corporation. That's how hidden hands are hidden hands, brothers and sisters. Because corporations are systematic and organized conceptions of thought from individuals which have expanded its power and reach into many communities and aspects of the country and of the world to extort and manipulate and not be seen, because it has expanded through power by other people, binded by contract. So there are many members of corporations who do not understand what they are condoning or pushing forward, because it is finely polished and clean by the time it gets to them to push the agendas even further. See, corporations are tied by governmental law, which is why businesses are always behind the motives and intents of war. For war is only a further expansion of resources by usurping or taking over another place's or another country's resources to expand itself in territory, protected by the guns of the military. This is corporate thugging. I'm sure you brothers and sisters thought you knew a thug, but are far from the mark of who the real thugs are. For even the movie Menace to Society wasn't called Menace T.O. Society, it was Menace numeral 2 Society. Because even in that movie, there were those of the extortive nature and manipulation and monopoly that came into the ghettos of that movie to get those brothers and sisters to take the cars and to rob and steal, to get those vehicles back to the chop shop, which had the VIN numbers changed by the DMV so that those Europeans could resell those cars after they were stolen by the African brothers and sisters in the movie. So many of us focus on those who are stealing the cars, but we do not look at those who they are stealing the cars for. For we are not controlling the numbers of the DMV to reintroduce vehicles and supply for the demand of corruption of vehicles and merchandise to be reintroduced into society with new serial numbers. We are not even involved in that level and hierarchy of criminal behavior. For we are only contracted to steal, but not to capitalize. Corporate thugging is something that is not new within our society. Corporate thugging is something that we are being awakened to understand what is going on by nature. For a suit and tie does not make you divine. For a suit and tie does not make you righteous. It only creates the introduction and trickery of a wolf in sheep's clothing. Let us wake up and see what's going on. For religious business is the key to a conqueror's success when they are no follower of the true God. We have dropped the ball tremendously. We question nothing, and we seek to party and be merry, not knowing tomorrow we may die. For it is said even in Scripture, eat and drink and be merry, for tomorrow you shall die. Many of us have met our death long ago because we have never been spiritually awakened. We have never been spiritually awakened to the truth of who the true God is. For as I said earlier, Moses was learned in all the way of the Egyptians. And many of us do not know who the Egyptians are. These are our ancestors, our African kings and queens. But yet Moses is telling us about the beginning in a new cultural linguistic, because Moses is an English word, and Egyptians were not English language speaking people. So if this is a reintroduction of our spiritual Bible, our spiritual source to get back to our understanding of God in ourselves, who is this speaking on our behalf, and what God are they introducing us to? This would be series 1 of 2 of Corporate Thuggin. Y'all don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, peace.